Before I get into the movie, I want to set something straight because this seemed to pop up in the comments of my Home on the Range video quite a bit. I didn't hate these movies. Unless I say outright that I didn't like them, you can safely assume that I did enjoy them, at least when I was a kid. These reviews are purely for the sake of fun and not meant to sour anyone's milk if you did enjoy the movie. Cool? Cool. Brother Bear in particular was a movie I adored when I first saw it. I watched it over and over and over, and I couldn't get enough of it. The beautiful style and art, the fact that it took place in the far north, a place I've wanted to live since I was a small child, and still would love to move to someday, it was stunning. Especially the parts with the northern lights. You just don't get effects like this out of 3D animation. The sense of wonder and magic that you get from animation like this is something that only hand-drawn animation can truly pull off. 3D can look good, sure, but it just doesn't have the same feel. The story centers around Kenai, played by Joaquin Phoenix, a young man who is getting ready for his coming-of-age ceremony. In his culture, this involves being given a totem of a certain animal which represents particular traits that they're encouraged to live their lives by, such as guidance, patience, wisdom, strength, or courage. He is presented with his totem by the village elder, which turns out to be a bear, an animal he clearly doesn't like, representing love. This is an obvious disappointment to him, both because it doesn't seem particularly manly, unlike the totems his brothers got, the Eagle of Guidance for his oldest brother Sitka, played by D.B. Sweeney, and the Wolf of Wisdom for his brother Denahi, played by Jason Reyes. The village elder Tanana, played by Joan Copeland, tries to help him understand that love is a powerful thing, possibly the most powerful, but it clearly doesn't sink in. The celebration going on until everyone returns to the village. Sitka tries to tell Kenai that he was unsure about his own totem at first as well, but eventually came to understand it, and he has faith that Kenai would soon understand his own as well. Kenai begins pointing out how silly it seems that a bear represents love, considering that he thinks they're mindless monsters who are incapable of feeling anything, which only seems confirmed when they find out one of the baskets of fish has been torn down and taken away by bears. Going by the area this took place in and the looks of the bears, I'm gonna guess they're either grizzlies or Kodiaks. Denahi is particularly harsh on Kenai about it, considering that he made the basket himself and the village needs the food, yelling at Kenai until Sitka intervenes, with Kenai saying he'll go get the basket back. Going by all the pieces on the ground, I don't think that's happening. He tracks down the bear, but unfortunately the basket was destroyed, making him pretty angry. He ends up spotting the bear and throwing a rock at it, provoking it into attacking, and ends up in a fight that traps him on a glacier. Denahi and Sitka come to the rescue, but are unable to take the bear down with just the three of them, Sitka being forced to sacrifice himself to save his brothers, using his spear to crack the glacier and causing it to fall into the water below, ending his life. I really like how they show the relationship between the three brothers. Whoever wrote for them clearly had siblings themselves and knew the dynamic personally. The responsible older brother, the teasing middle brother, and the reckless baby brother that gets away with everything. They act very naturally in how almost all siblings, especially those in sets of 3 or 4, behave as far as I've ever seen. This, of course, makes it all the more heartbreaking when they lose their brother, who has pretty much been the glue holding their family together at this point. The bear survives the fall, and runs away while Kenai and Denahi search for their brother, finding only the tattered remains of his coat. After a very somber funeral, Kenai wants to go hunt the bear down for revenge. Denahi doesn't want to, stating that he doesn't blame the bear. Now, I think the way he meant it was that the bear was simply acting as wild animals do and no one was really to blame. But the way he said it clearly made Kenai believe that Denahi was blaming him for the death of their brother. Denahi tried to talk Kenai down, but Kenai refuses, determined to go find the bear and get revenge for Sitka's death, rejecting his own totem in the process. He does eventually track the bear down, trapping her on a rocky plateau, and is able to kill her. Denahi didn't realize this, having followed, but with too much distance between them to actually see what happened, only hearing the bear roaring and his brothers screaming. And he was screaming from grief and having won, I suppose, but Denahi clearly translated it as his brother being in trouble. The spirits, including Sitka, come down from the sky in clear disapproval of what he's done. He didn't kill for food or to protect anyone. He killed out of anger, and that's unacceptable in the eyes of the spirits. For this, he is transformed into a bear himself to get a new perspective on life. Speaking of perspectives, the perspective of not only the main character, but of the audience changes at this point, because up until now, the movie had been made in a traditional 175:1 widescreen format, but after his transformation, it switches to a new ratio at 2:35:1, which is much bigger. This reflects the way that Kenai's views were very narrow at the beginning, and now his perspective of the world is broadening and changing, as is that of the audience. In theaters, they used curtains to help this effect, the curtains starting out more closed, framing the film at the starting ratio. Then, when the screen is dark before Kenai wakes up, they moved the curtains further out to expose more of the screen, so the full picture was visible, letting the audience share the broadened view that Kenai now had. He finds that he can understand animals now, and is understandably a little freaked out by this change. He's found by the village elder, who tries to help him understand his new situation and tell him how he can fix it. Now, this is the point in the movie that starts going downhill for me. Not because he was turned into a bear, and this just seems to be a thing that Disney really liked doing with their people of color characters for a while. No, it was because up until this point, the way people spoke and behaved was mostly timeless. They didn't use slang, they weren't using catchphrases and making modern-day pop culture references that no one would have known back then, and they didn't date the movie too badly. They were speaking in a very natural way that could fit into pretty much any time period. However, once the animals start talking, particularly after the comedy relief moose, Rut and Took, are introduced, you start getting slang, catchphrases, modern-day references, and jokes every which way you turn. It ruins the timeless feel of the movie and clearly marks it as something that could only have come out in the late 90s to early 2000s, when pop culture references were basically the framework that movie comedy was built on. I don't have a problem with pop culture references if they're appropriate to the environment, like if the setting is in modern day, something like Big Hero 6, the kind of environment where pop culture, exists. However, this is set in the far, far past, when woolly mammoths still roamed, when humanity as we know it was in its infancy. It just doesn't fit. Kenai ends up in a trap and is helped out by a cub named Koda, played by Jeremy Suarez. I have mixed feelings about Koda. Cute kid characters are really, really hard to get right. I understand that it's something incredibly difficult to pull off, because there is a very fine line between cute and annoying. Unfortunately, Koda crosses that line many, many times. For the most part, he's okay. Not great, but okay. And he serves his purpose as the catalyst for showing Kenai the way to the mountain where the lights touch, where he has to go to change back into a human, and is the one who helps Kenai start seeing that bears aren't the mindless monsters he always thought, and there's more to them than he ever realized. He also finds out that he's being hunted by none other than Denahi, his older brother, who found the remains of his clothes on the plateau with him when he was turned into a bear and didn't realize that Kenai was the bear. He thought that the bear had now cost him both his brothers' lives and went on his own quest for revenge for his family. We never see their parents or hear anything about them at any point, so we can probably safely assume that they succumbed to Disney parent syndrome before the events of the movie. From there, it's a standard road trip movie, albeit with truly gorgeous landscapes and animation. You get him acting weird, and Koda teaching him how to do things as a bear and how to appreciate the beauty of the world around him from a new perspective, and Kenai shows him how to do things the way he did as a human, like riding the mammoths to try and hide their trail from Denahi. They run into him again later, but have a narrow escape, finding some cave paintings with Koda referring to the humans in the paintings as scary monsters, making Kenai realize that, from a bear's perspective, humans are the scary ones, the ones who change their environment to suit themselves, and the ones who hunt and kill pretty much every wild animal that exists, including bears. They make it to the salmon run, close to the location of the mountain Kenai needs, where Kenai meets the other bears. And even as strange as he is, he's quickly accepted and starts seeing how much the bears care about each other, and how they all act like one big family, much the same way his village did. Now, this is of course not how bears work in reality. Bears are very solitary, territorial animals, and if two bears run into each other, especially if a male bear runs into a mother with cubs, chances are there's going to be blood. Like, a lot. Bears do tend to somewhat tolerate each other a little more around good salmon fishing spots when they're fattening up for the winter, because they're trying to use their energy to eat as much as possible. They don't want to waste that energy fighting each other. But of course, this is heavily exaggerated for the sake of story, and Tug doesn't decide to try and eat Koda. In the evening, they have a story time which includes one of the best jokes in animation.
This year, I lost my dear husband, Edgar.
Quit telling everyone I'm dead!
Sometimes I can still hear his voice.
And eventually, they get to Koda, who tells a story that gives Kenai clear flashbacks to what he did. See, this whole time, Koda has been wanting to get to the salmon run because he was separated from his mother, and he knows that she'll turn up there so he can reunite with her. What Koda doesn't know is that she's not coming, because she's the bear that killed Sitka and was killed in revenge by Kenai. Kenai realizes this very quickly and runs away. Eventually, he has to tell Koda, telling him in the form of his own story. Koda soon understands what he meant, and is of course devastated. Kenai realizing how much pain his search for vengeance has caused someone he cares about. Not just Koda, but Denahi as well, who lost his older brother and thought he lost his baby brother as well because of Kenai's reckless search for revenge. Not even bear moms are safe from Disney parent syndrome. If you ever find yourself falling through a portal and ending up in any universe made by Disney, don't have kids. It's a terminal illness. Kenai heads up the mountain to be changed back, where a confrontation with Denahi nearly cost Kenai his life, Koda showing up to try and help, forcing Kenai to actually fight his brother, and nearly get killed exactly the same way Koda's mother did, only for the spirits to intervene and transform him back, Denahi realizing what's happened. Sitka's spirit doesn't say a word, his thoughts expressed entirely through body language and facial expression. God, I miss 2D animation like this. And the brothers are reunited, even if only for a few moments. Kenai realizes, however, that Koda has no one. His mother is gone. Now, of course I imagine one of the bears at the salmon run would probably be happy to look after Koda if they found out that he needed somebody to care for him, particularly Tug, and they could have just taken him back to the village to grow up as sort of a village pet, but that wouldn't fit the message of the story. Instead, Kenai decides that he can't abandon Koda, and the spirits turn him back into a bear so he can raise Koda in the wild. They do briefly make a stop at the village for Kenai to put his paw print, on the wall where those who have achieved a life honoring their totem get to make their mark, since he has chosen to lead a life guided by love. The story was being told by an elderly Denahi the whole time, telling the younger members of the tribe the story of his brother to impart the lesson of how powerful love can truly be. Huh. Given that bears have a significantly shorter lifespan than humans, around 20-25 years or so, Kenai and Koda were probably long gone by then. Wonder if the spirit magic made Kenai live longer. Who knows? Now, I feel like almost everything Kenai did in the movie was motivated by love to some extent, except the very first time he went out after the bear. That was purely out of anger for the basket and the stolen fish. But after that, going out to get revenge for his fallen brother? That could easily be seen as an act motivated by love. It was the love for his brother and the pain of losing him that made him act that way. But I digress. The movie wasn't well advertised and didn't make the box office numbers they were hoping for, with a budget of $46 million, making a box office of $250.4 million. It was a success, and considered enough of one to even get a sequel later on, but it wasn't the massive hit they were hoping for. While I certainly think that's a great profit, Disney had started considering movies failures if they didn't blow everything else out of the water from day one. The music in the movie was done by Phil Collins and Mark Mancina. The instrumental score is gorgeous, and the opening song sung by Tina Turner was spectacular. However, the songs where Phil Collins got involved were rather too on the nose, at least for my tastes. On My Way wasn't bad, though I feel like they could have tried to make it a little less like something you'd hear on the radio during a road trip, something a little less generic, you know? However, No Way Out was just ugh. Instead of having a sad instrumental score, or, listening to Kenai describing what he did, we have to hear Phil Collins telling us how to feel. That what we're seeing is sad, and we should feel bad about it. That everything is terrible and sad. We know. We know it's bad. We don't need to be told how we're supposed to feel. Show, don't tell is a thing for a reason. When any piece of media has to tell you how to feel, it has failed at its job. It should never tell you how to feel. It should try to lead you to those feelings naturally through the music, story, and visuals. Going up to someone and saying, "You're sad now," is cheap and just makes the whole thing feel incredibly forced and stupid. If you have to tell the audience how to feel, you have failed at inducing those feelings the way you're supposed to, through the story. An instrumental score would have been so much better in this scene. No hate to Phil Collins, I do genuinely like some of his music, but most of the time in animation he tends to just say what's happening on screen, but in a generic enough way that you can play the song on the radio without anyone who didn't see the movie knowing it was made for that. I'm just not super into it. The story of Brother Bear changed a lot from the original idea. After the success of Lion King, Eisner really wanted more animal-centric stories, and suggested a North American setting taking inspiration from a painting by Albert Bierstadt? Something. I can't say this name. In the original story, inspired by King Lear, the hero would be a blind bear king of the forest and his 3 daughters. In 1997, a veteran animator named Aaron Blaise joined because, well, he wanted to animate bears. I don't blame the guy, they're fun to draw. Being joined by co-director Robert Walker, Blaise wanted a more naturalistic story, so he and producer Chuck Williams reworked the story into a father and son story where the son transformed into a bear and in the end, stayed one. Then president of Disney Feature Animation, Thomas Schumacher, approved the idea wholeheartedly, and Tab Murphy, a veteran writer who had worked on such projects as Hunchback of Notre Dame, Atlantis, and Tarzan, came aboard to help write the script. The story artists and several others on the project traveled to visit Alaska for research, including the Denali National Park, Kodiak Island, Kenai Fjords National Park, and Holgate Glacier, along with later visiting Yellowstone and other national parks in the lower 48. In early 2000, the story changed a bit, with the transformed Kenai being taken under the wing of an older bear named Grizz. However, they found the film lacking in charm, so they decided to change Grizz into a cub, renamed Koda. Despite amazing performances by Tina Turner, who sang the opening number, the Bulgarian Women's Choir, and others, despite the gorgeous animation and unique landscape, it didn't quite meet the standards that they were hoping for. It was given a lukewarm reception by critics, though audiences mostly liked it. Critic Roger Ebert writing that the film didn't have the zowie factor that Lion King or Finding Nemo had, and it was more sweet than exciting. Todd McCarthy summarized it as a very mild entry from Disney, with a distinctly recycled feel with characters and narrative failing to engage strong interest, and the story too serious to enchant younger children the way the more simplified good versus evil stories of the past did. Stephen Holden remarked that the movie was too heavy on message and too light on humor. It was nominated for several awards, though it didn't win any, and very nearly got a TV show spin-off which would feature Kenai and Koda adopting other orphaned animals and the adventures they'd all go on together in the Alaskan wilderness. The pilot tested well, but it was not picked up because they said the movie performed below expectations despite making such a large profit. It was considered another sign that 2D animation was failing, and pushed them just a little further towards exclusively 3D production, because Disney wasn't satisfied with modest or even moderate success. They only wanted blockbuster hits, and anything less was considered a financial failure. This movie was one that I watched over and over and over as a kid, and several of the songs still live on my phone and in a saved playlist that I have that has existed ever since I downloaded the MP3 files off LimeWire when I was younger. I'm sure some of you are tilting your heads in confusion while others are saying, "God damn, you're old," which, yes, I am. This movie was a piece of my childhood that, even with the small annoyances I had with it, I could never regret, and I still return to it as a comfort film every once in a while. I particularly enjoyed it because my birth totem is actually a bear, and I felt a special connection to this movie. Sometimes it felt like it was talking directly to me. Having had the particular childhood I did, I'm largely disconnected from the cultures that I come from, and I felt like I didn't have the right to claim a lot of things that relate to them. But this one I felt I could, and it helped me feel a little closer to a culture I still haven't been able to connect much with. I love how it introduced people to some aspects of a culture most of them have likely never heard of, and covered some serious topics in a way that kids could relate to and understand, like taking responsibility for your own actions and how not everything is strictly good versus evil. Sometimes, neither side is evil, just misunderstanding. And it's through communication and love that we can help understand each other and move forward. Thank you all for joining me for another video. If you have suggestions for what I should cover next, please feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Adios.
In accordance with all federal and state wildlife regulations, no fish were harmed during the making of this film.
No! He couldn't!